The day I'm recording this, the 25th of August 2022, marks the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Milne Bay. To commemorate this is a special re-release and re-recording of episode 12 of season 1 of the life, service and sacrifice of squadron leader Peter St. George Bruce Turnbull, DFC, was killed in that decisive battle of the Pacific. By mid-1942, the Japanese had swept all before them on their way through Southeast Asia. In Papua, they were fighting deep in the jungle along the Kokoda Trail, and by mid-August had advanced as far as Isarava. To support this advance, on late in the night of the 25th of August 1942, a force of 2,800 Marines landed at Milne Bay on the southeastern tip of Papua. They intended to capture the Allied fields protecting the seaward passages to the east, with orders to smash to pieces the enemy lines and take the aerodrome by storm. Initially, the Japanese were met with the same level of success they had experienced since December 1941 as they advanced steadily inward, supported by 2 light tanks. The Allies, however, had been warned of the landing and had heavily reinforced the garrison. The battle that followed raged through incessant rains, ankle-deep mud, thick jungle, and malaria-ridden swamps. By late August, the Australians had regained the initiative, forcing the Japanese back along the coast, and by the 7th of September, enemy forces had been evacuated by sea. Of the 2,800 Japanese who had landed at Milne Bay, some 750 lay dead around the bay, while others died attempting to escape overland to Buna. More than 160 Australians would lose their lives, including 36 who were captured and executed. 14 Americans were also killed, as well as 59 Papuans. Milne Bay was the first decisive defeat of a Japanese offensive on land in the Second World War, and a major Allied victory. Reflecting on the battle after the war, British Field Marshal Sir William Slim stated that Australian troops had, at Milne Bay, New Guinea, inflicted on the Japanese their first undoubted defeat on land. Some of us may forget that of all the Allies, it was the Australian soldiers who first broke the invincibility of the Japanese. The victory at Milne Bay owed much to the Royal Australian Air Force, whose Kitty Hawk sank enemy landing craft and destroyed shipping, suppressing enemy movements in the process. The sinking of enemy barges in particular cut supply lines and prevented the Japanese from performing outflanking maneuvers around the coastline. Such was the importance of Numbers 75 and 76 squadrons that Major General Cyril Klaus, the commander of the Allied forces at Milne Bay, praised their untiring and courageous work, which had earned the admiration of all. Australia's military history is more than a collection of dates and the locations of war-ravaged battlefields. It is the stories of service and sacrifice of those who answered the call of their country of birth or adoption, and the enduring legacy they created. Join me as we look into one of those stories. Welcome to I Was Only Doing My Job, a Doc Network podcast. Peter St. George Bruce Turnbull was born on the 9th of February 1917 in Armidale, in the New England region of northern New South Wales, to Archibald and Maud Gwendolyn Turnbull. He grew up in a prominent grazier family and spent most of his upbringing at his father's property, Glenrule, near Glenennis. He attended the local grammar school and then represented it in A-grade soccer and Glenennis in swimming and A-grade cricket. After Turnbull received his intermediate certificate indicating that he'd completed 3 years of high school, he employed as an electrician in Glenennis. In his spare time, he was also an avid and highly experienced horseman and held a number of Australian championships for bullock riding and bulldogging, a rodeo event where steers wrestled to the ground, which he won at the Warwick Show in Queensland. He also won championships at the Sydney Royal Show. In 1938, at the age of 21, he enlisted as a trooper on the 12th 24th Light Horse Regiment of the Militia. The following year, as the threat of war loomed, the Australian government introduced the Universal Service Scheme, which outlined mandatory military training for all men of war-fighting age, and promptly broke up the 12th 24th into its 2 constituent units. So, on the 16th of January, Turnbull enlisted in the Royal Australian Air Force and underwent training at No. 1 Flying Training School at Point Cook, Victoria, as an air cadet. While he was undergoing pilot training, the Second World War broke out. He would graduate on the 20th of October 1939 and be commissioned as a pilot officer and was posted to No. 3 Army Cooperation Squadron, a fighter squadron that specialized in Army air cooperation with ground units, and trained in roles such as close air support, reconnaissance sorties, and even dropping supplies for the troops on the ground. Initially, he would fly Hawker Demons out of RAAF Station Richmond, New South Wales. While there, he would be promoted to flying officer on the 20th of April, and on the 15th of July 1940, No. 3 Squadron left Sydney bound for the Middle East to support the Australian 6th Division. The following month, Turnbull disembarked at Suez, where No. 3 Squadron was equipped with the Gloucester Gladiator aircraft and primarily undertook both ground support roles and the traditional fighter mission. He would write home on the 15th of December saying, "4 of us have been chosen for the Western Desert to brush up on dive bombing. And believe me, we got stuck into it properly. We had some fun, but it was all for a good cause. These aircraft are fairly old and slow, but they did their job, which is the main thing. They took us out often and brought us home each time, so we can't grumble." It was in this obsolete aircraft that Turnbull regularly engaged the pilots and state-of-the-art aircraft from the Regia Aeronautica, or the Italian Air Force. Just before Christmas, Turnbull was part of a formation of 8 gladiators, escorting a Lysander aircraft that was observing an artillery bombardment on Bardia, Libya, when they took on 2 flights of 5 enemy S-79 bombers, who were escorted by 9 Italian Fiat CR-42 fighters, and a second formation of 24 CR-42s. "I gave 3 a hiding, and I'm almost sure 1 went in," he wrote in his combat report. "But the fight was localized, so it was hard to say for sure who the 2 belonged to. However, it has gone down as a probable to me." He would go on to damage a Fiat G50, the workhorse of the Italian Air Force, on the 25th of January 1941, the last sortie that No. 3 Squadron flew in the aging Gladiator, before it converted to the Hawker Hurricane, an aircraft made famous by the Battle of Britain. On the 3rd of April, Turnbull shot down 4 Messerschmitt Bf-110s during a single sortie, and soon earned the nickname the Flying Cowboy. This came as a response to a period of leave in Gambart in Libya, when Turnbull found and rode a small donkey. This resulted in him being nicknamed the Cowboy, which later became the Flying Cowboy. In response to this, Turnbull would christen his Hurricane as Otogo in honour of a horse he had back in Australia. Not long afterwards, No. 3 Squadron moved to Palestine and was re-equipped with P-40 Tomahawks. Turnbull served with the squadron with great distinction through the Syrian campaign of June and July 1941, where he became a fighter ace, the first flying the Tomahawk. When he shot down his 5th aircraft, the Vichy French Martin 167 bomber in southern Syria. He shot down 2 more of the same type over Palmyra less than 2 weeks later, and followed this up by claiming 2 Vichy Dewotyne D-520 fighters during escort duty on the 10th of July. He would be promoted to flight lieutenant that month. In October 1941, he was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for his actions. This officer has carried out 116 operational sorties involving 200 hours of flying, the citation read. One day in April of 1941, his formation engaged 16 enemy aircraft which were attacking our troops. Flying Officer Turnbull personally destroyed 3 Messerschmitts in the combat. He has destroyed 8 enemy aircraft in the air and inflicted considerable damage to aircraft on the ground, as well as to mechanical transports and troops. Throughout, he has shown a magnificent fighting spirit and great skill. In December 1941, Turnbull returned to Australia and was greeted with much fanfare by the Mayor of Glenennis and about 150 townsfolk who wanted to wish him well and welcome him home. During a civic reception at the local town hall, Turnbull refused to take full credit for his receiving the DFC, instead attributing it to the efforts of the squadron. He was posted first to No. 24 Squadron, a bomber squadron at RAAF Station Archerfield, Queensland in December, before in January-February 1942 he was on the staff of No. 3 Service Flying Training School at RAAF Station Amberley, which was the practice at the time to rotate veteran pilots in to train new recruits. In March 1942 he joined No. 75 Squadron, which was based at Port Moresby, Papua, as a flight commander, flying the upgraded P-40 Kitty Hawk and engaged in the defence of the city. Even before he officially joined the squadron, he was fired on as he brought in a flight of 4 Kitty Hawks at Moresby's 7 Mile Aerodrome on the 21st of March, though his opponent was a nervous Australian anti-aircraft gunner defending the airfield. The following day, he participated in a surprise raid on the Japanese-held Lae airfields, providing protective cover for a striking element. Even in this position, Turnbull shot down one of the 3 Japanese Mitsubishi Zero fighters that had intercepted the formation. He would claim 2 more victories during the battle at Port Moresby, shooting down another 2 Zeros, bringing his total count to 12. No. 75 Squadron would be rotated back to Australia for resupply and training shortly afterwards. In May, Turnbull was posted as the commanding officer of No. 76 Kitty Hawk Squadron to replace the previous commander who had been shot down. He was promoted to acting squadron leader on the 8th of June. Like No. 75 Squadron, No. 76 Squadron was equipped with the P-40 Kitty Hawk and sent to Papua on the 25th of July to defend the airfields at Milne Bay on the southeastern tip of Papua against Japanese aggression. Following the landing by Japanese Marines at Milne Bay on the 25th of August, the RAAF Kitty Hawks of 75 and 76 Squadrons soon played a crucial role, destroying Japanese landing barges and stores, Flying at treetop level, they strafed enemy positions and suppressed their movements. 2 days later, Turnbull was on a mission with Flight Lieutenant Ron Kervill to spot and attack 2 Japanese tanks that had been causing heavy casualties on the ground at Milne Bay. It was then that disaster struck. It was about dusk when we took off together to attack a Japanese tank located on the roadway right of the shore of Milne Bay. Kervill later wrote in a letter to Turnbull's mother. Peter was in good spirits as we talked over the method of attack as we flew out to locate the target. He told me exactly what to do if my engine failed. Hop out, old boy, and swim for it. On the 27th of August, Turnbull was on a mission to spot and attack 2 Japanese tanks that had been causing heavy casualties on the ground, and he spotted his target while diving on an enemy target. His Kitty Hawk was seen to flip on its back 200 feet or 61 meters, and then crash into the jungle. He was really happy to be flying again after a few days on the ground. He told me to keep top cover, watch his attack, and follow him in. As I did so, I saw his aircraft dive from about 600 feet and from about 500 yards out to sea. His guns opened fire in a long burst. Traces could be seen flying in all directions from the tank, and I couldn't tell whether it was return fire or Peter's own fire. He carried out the dive very low, and his aircraft during the recovery turned over, hit the trees, and disappeared into the dense undergrowth. I called over the radio in the hopes that perhaps he was not badly hurt, but fortunately he was killed instantly, for which we were thankful as the target was 400 yards inside enemy territory. The thought of him being in Japanese hands at that stage of the struggle was not a pleasant one. Although he had passed on, I assure you Peter's spirit still lives with the squadron, in which he was so proud we will never forget him. The cause of the crash was never truly established. Ground fire was considered a likely explanation, although mud on the control surfaces causing a high-speed stall was also postulated. Initially posted as missing, on the 4th of September, 8 days later, a patrol from the 2nd 12th Battalion found the plane near KB Mission and recovered his body from the wreckage. He was buried in a temporary cemetery at Milne Bay, marked with a wooden cross, and was later reinterred at the larger Bomana War Cemetery in Port Moresby. He was 25 years old. Such was the regard in which he was held amongst pilots and troops on the ground, the official historian later wrote. Soldiers much admired and appreciated the work of the 2 RAAF squadrons, and for them, the gallant Turnbull had epitomised the courage and skill of all the airmen. Australia's defeat of the Japanese at Milne Bay owed much to the RAAF and men like Turnbull. Their Kitty Hawks sank enemy landing craft and shipping, destroyed enemy stockpiles of supplies, and suppressed their movements of troops. But such was the importance of 75 and 76 squadrons that Major General Cyril Clowes specifically praised the RAAF's untiring and courageous work, which has earned the admiration of all. The commander of the New Guinea Force, Lieutenant General Sidney Rowell, noted that the actions of the 2 RAAF's fighter squadrons were the battle's decisive factor. After Turnbull's death, Milne Bay's No. 3 strip was renamed Turnbull Field in his honour. It marked the furthest westward advance of the Japanese in the area and was a lasting reminder of his remarkable courage and bravery. During all operations in the area, Turnbull's leadership, judgment, and organising ability have been an inspiration, Kervill later wrote in his diary at Milne Bay. Never still, he provided a wonderful example to all. Back home, Turnbull's parents were devastated by his death, but were somewhat comforted by the letters they received from his friends and colleagues. In a letter to Turnbull's mother, leading aircraftsman Doug Cox said of Turnbull's deeds, "Showed everyone he just ceased being an officer and became our hero and a real friend." He enclosed a poem that included these lines: "But pilots say when dusk is grey and the sunset fires grow dim, that Turnbull flies those cloudy skies and angels smile on him." His friend and fellow pilot, Alan Rowlandson, wrote simply, "He was one of the most outstanding pilots and personalities of the original 3 Squadron, and was well known throughout the Middle East. His name was legend on the northern fronts. It was with deep regret and bitterness that we learnt of Pete's death in action. His manner and sense of duty were an inspiration to all. Australia has lost one of its finest men." I honestly couldn't say it better myself. But there you have it. That is the life, service, and legacy of Squadron Leader Peter St. George Bruce Turnbull, DFC. Thanks for listening to the I Was Only Doing My Job podcast, a Doc Network production. This episode was written, produced, and audio engineered by me, Ross Manuel, with additional research done by Laurie Favell. I'd really appreciate it, and it would help out the show, if you took some time to share this with a friend, or leave a review on Spotify, or Google Podcasts, or iTunes, or anywhere that you listen to podcasts, as it really helps other people find the show. If you want to know more about today's episode, with photos, show notes, and transcripts, head to www.thedocnetwork.net and follow the show on IWODMJ on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Don't worry, there's a link in the show notes. If you want to follow me for history-related hijinks and other nerdery, you can follow me on practically everything at Doc Winters. Once again, thanks for listening and catch you next time. Bye!